The Bipeds. Written by Iowa Kid 97. Read by Daniel Million. It had been 50 rotations since the Federation flagship Protector had gone missing. Its last reported position was near the edge of Federation space, right on the frontier of unexplored wild space. It had reported detecting an unidentified vessel of unknown configuration and was going to move for a standard seize and investigate mission. That was the last transmission ever received from the Protector. They had sent multiple search party fleets, done sweeps of dozens of systems, starting with the closest ones to the last reported position, and slowly expanding outward, searching system by system, coming up empty every time. Eventually, they officially declared the Protector lost in space, and called off the search. The disappearance was somewhat of a mystery for a while. Having no lead save for the unidentified vessel of unknown configuration we knew they were going to investigate. Truth is, we had no idea what happened. That is, until about 5 rotations ago. A small scout ship located a single escape pod from the Protector about 50 light-years from the Protector's last known position. It held a single occupant, Commander Zorp, the Protector's first officer. He had put himself in stasis, likely due to the lack of enough rations to last long enough. The scout ship had revived Commander Zorp and brought him here, to my base. Initially, I was excited to debrief him, but he could not say much of anything. He was quite literally too scared to speak, save for some muttering of a symbol. That was 4 rotations ago, and every day I waited in anticipation for him to be ready to debrief, and every day he had broken down halfway through the first sentence. Today was different. Today he finally recovered enough to speak. Finally the mystery would be solved. Date: Rotation 155. Year 1011 Central Federation Calendar, spoke the analyst into the recorder. Commander Zorp to recount the events that led to the Protector's disappearance. The analyst motioned to Commander Zorp, who sheepishly leaned forward and began in a quiet, almost whisper. It was a standard. Speak into the recorder, please, the analyst cut him off, and start with the date. I shifted in my seat. I'll admit I was a bit impatient, but I held myself together. The analyst was just doing their job. The date was rotation 105, year 1011, Central Federation Calendar. We had detected a small vessel of unknown configuration. It couldn't have been more than 50 Zans long. Hell, the Protector was 1,000 Zans long. The damn thing fit in our cargo bay. He paused for a second, collecting himself before continuing. It should have been a standard seize and investigate mission. Disable the ship, pull it in, scan and reverse engineer the technology, question the occupants, then release. Standard. Well, the disable their ship part was much harder than it should have been. That tiny ship was extremely maneuverable, which is somewhat common for a ship that size, I suppose. But the firepower. No ship that small should be able to pack that much of a punch. He stopped to collect himself again before continuing. That ship had the firepower of a ship half the size of the Protector, not one 20 times smaller. Hell, Captain almost called the damn thing off, but we managed to disable them. Honestly, a few more volleys, and I think the Captain would have called it off. He paused for a while. I was about to speak up, but the analyst beat me to it. Go on. Commander Zorp locked eyes with me, almost pleading to let him stop. Of course, I stood firm, and he continued. We brought it on board, and the breach team began to cut into the docking hatch. Again, it took much longer than it normally would have with any other alien vessel we have come across. Eventually, we did manage to breach the door, and the boarding party entered. He paused, locking eyes again. That team was among the first to die. Each team member was broadcasting what they saw, and I was watching from the bridge along with the captain. At first, we only saw glimpses. A flash of what looked like some sort of creature. We only saw a glimpse, but it seemed to have 2 legs and walk upright. Of course, it was gone long before we could get a real good look at it. The team fanned out to cover more ground and clear the ship faster. That's when the first team member went offline. Their feed just cut out. No weapons fire, no screams, no sort of indication of any danger. Just entered a room and the feed cut out. We sent another to check up on them, and the same thing happened to them. The commander took a deep breath before continuing. We sent the rest of the team after them. The first half reached their location first. This time, nothing happened. They entered the same room as the first two, but this time nothing. Nothing, I asked. Nothing, he continued. The room was empty, dark and quiet. And there was no signs of, anything. The team members were missing. There was no sign of any aliens, just a mostly empty room with a few consoles with flashing lights. The nothing only lasted a moment, though, he said, pausing for what I swear almost seemed like dramatic effect. In reality, I knew he was just collecting himself to continue. He then looked back at me. Then they sprang their trap. A lot happened all at once. The room the first half of the team was in suddenly lit up. Heck, as far as we could tell, the whole ship very suddenly powered up and came to life. The second half of the team, we lost their feeds. But this time they didn't just disappear. We heard shrieks and weapons fire. Not just through the feeds of the first half of the team, but the surveillance systems in the hangar bay housing the alien ship picked it up too. By the time the first half of the team reached the second half, it was too late. They were dead. But the aliens didn't even bother hiding that time. The remaining team members' feed cut out, but not before I saw one. For just a second, I saw one of the aliens. It was bipedal. 2 arms, 2 legs. It was covered in mostly black coverings, I'm assuming armor or clothing, and the skin was a pinkish tan. But the biggest thing I remember, the most terrifying thing that stuck with me more than anything else, was the eyes. They were white, with a blue ring and a black center. But they weren't on either side of the head like most sapient species. No, these were the eyes of a predator, and they were staring right at me. Well, technically the poor soldier whose feed I was watching, but it felt like they were staring right at me. Commander Zorp stopped and took several deep, almost labored breaths. It was as if he was reliving his worst nightmare, except this was very real. The feed cut out almost immediately, and then suddenly the aliens' ship systems came back online. It shouldn't have. Every reading we had prior showed the alien ship had been disabled. Then it opened fire. It opened fire in a ship it was housed in, which is insane to even think about. Anyway, the automated security systems in the hangar bay returned fire. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but then the alien ship exploded. It exploded! Took out the hangar bay, communications, the FTL drive, and a good chunk of that and the surrounding decks. He took another pause before continuing. Luckily, the automated system sealed the decks almost immediately after the explosion, so we didn't lose too much atmosphere, but the damage had been done. I then decided to speak up. When we found and revived you, you kept mentioning something about a symbol. You weren't cognizant enough to elaborate, but... Symbol, he stated. We found a piece of the alien's hull on an adjacent deck. It had a symbol on it. Could you recreate the symbol now? I asked. He nodded, and the tech handed him a pad and a writing utensil. It took the commander a moment, but then he handed me the pad. I looked down and saw the symbol. I didn't know what it meant, but it obviously seemed to have some sort of significance to the bipedal aliens. In any case, it was our only lead. I handed the pad to my assistant. Load this into the main computer and have it analyzed. My assistant took the pad and exited the room before I turned my attention back to Commander Zorp and motioned for him to continue. We thought it was over. A very odd, abnormal, and violent end, but an end nonetheless. He paused, letting out a sigh. We couldn't have been more wrong. That's when things started to go wrong. Started? I asked, as if the whole incident up to that point had just been business as usual. Commander Zorp looked at me again, nodding. It started with small tools going missing. A plasma torch gone from an engineering tech's equipment. An armorer's lock disappeared. A data rod missing from IT. At first we thought it was just incidents attributed to a fatigued crew. After all, the damage was extreme, and the crew was working non-stop to fix it. It made some sense tools might get misplaced. But then things started getting really weird. At first, the main computer efficiency went down 2%. At first we attributed the efficiency decrease to the extra processing load it was taking on with all the repairs and the damage we had taken. Then life support started to malfunction, deck by deck. It didn't shut off, but rather changed the environmental settings. The oxygen levels decreased to 20%. The carbon dioxide levels rose to 0.05%. Nitrogen and some argon started replacing the helium, and the humidity decreased significantly. At first we thought it was a computer glitch, but every time we set it back to Federation standard, it would go back to the same wrong setting within a few hours. Hell, we even tried restarting the main computer. After that, we thought it worked as our readings were coming back normal, but we realized the computer sensors were lying to us, since we could feel no difference in the environment despite the computer telling us otherwise. A primal sense of fear started to form inside me, the kind where you know you're being watched by a predator. I knew where this story was going. After about a week, we figured out what was happening. Unfortunately, by then it was too late. It started after we got the FTL drive back online. Captain ordered an immediate return to the nearest Federation outpost. It should have been a cycle's trip to arrive, but after a cycle in FTL, the outpost was nowhere in sensor range. It didn't take long to realize we were off course, but not by some miscalculation. We were going the opposite direction. After that, we started a detailed investigation into the ship computer. That's when we finally realized what was happening. We found some footage from when the Bipeds' ship exploded. During the chaos, right before the explosion, about 5 of the Bipeds escaped. They used the attack and explosion as a diversion and escaped into the Protector. Captain ordered an immediate wiping of the computer and a full backup restore from before we encountered the aliens. Unfortunately, they were onto us. They didn't even try to hide their presence anymore. The computer went haywire. We watched helplessly as the computer pulled up, queried, and downloaded the database. Every classified file, every known species cultural index, every piece of data on that computer pulled up and downloaded to a single location on Deck 5. So the captain did the only thing we could do. He ordered a sweep of Deck 5, and for the Bipeds to be captured or eliminated. Commander Zorp paused, taking a deep breath and locking eyes with me before continuing. The soldiers never made it to Deck 5. The Bipeds knew we were coming, and ambushed the team en route. That's when they went on the offensive. They started taking the ship level by level. The crew members that didn't evacuate in time were knocked out by a single hit from their weapons. It's at this point the captain ordered the remaining crew to abandon ship. Somehow they knew, and intercepted us on the way to the escape pods. Captain ordered us to push through and escape at all costs. None of us made it. None of you? I asked, confused. Well, obviously you made it. No, General, Commander Zorp replied. I made it the furthest. But as I was entering my escape pod, Commander Zorp took a deep breath. As I entered my escape pod, it grabbed me and pulled me back. It shoved me into the wall and looked me directly in the eye. The eyes were soul-piercing. The white, the blue ring, and the black dot in the middle. Honestly, General, I thought I was going to die. What happened? I asked. It held me there for a moment, then spoke in Zalarian. How they knew to speak my home language was beyond me, but I'll never forget what it said. What did it say? Well, sir, he had a message for you. Me? I asked, confused and admittedly a little terrified. Well, command as a whole, Commander Zorb explained. The biped said, "We don't know why you attacked us, but tell your superiors it won't happen again." And then it shoved me in the escape pod and ejected, sir. They took our standard seize and investigate protocol as an act of aggression and, I asked. Well, sir, at first I took the biped's words as a warning to not do that again, to stay away from their ships. But, well, you see... Get to the point, Commander. I knew where Commander Zorb was going with this, but I had hoped I was wrong. Well, you see, I've had a lot of time to think about this. Their ship, at least based on the data we received, and from what I could make of it,
Well, there should have been more than 5. Only 5 made it out, but the ship they were in could have easily, comfortably had at least double that.
My heart sank.
I know they took our actions as an act of aggression, but if I'm right, I think we may have accidentally killed some of them too. So if I'm right, they don't just think we are the aggressive ones, but their words weren't a warning to stay away, but a warning of retribution, sir,
he said, his voice starting to shake.
They are coming.
By all accounts, the next 3 rotations were anything but ordinary. Supplies shipped in, patrols came in and out. Commander Zorp was transferred to command to restate his testimony and give as much information on the bipedal threat as possible. I had recommended an immediate mobilization. Activate the reserves, increase warship production, retrofit every fleet vessel to wartime standards. Command accepted my recommendation, but when asked what sector to mobilize the fleet in, well, I was at a loss. Even Commander Zorp had no idea where these bipeds were from. We had no idea where they would come from, how many ships they would muster up for an invasion. Hell, we didn't even know if our assessment of an invasion was correct. But if it was, a single tiny ship and 5 of these bipeds managed to take out the Federation flagship and a crew of over 500 Federation crew members. And that was knowing nothing about us before the encounter. Now they knew just about everything about us from the Protector's database. Not to mention they most likely had plenty of time to reverse engineer, analyze, and figure out our most advanced technology. Meanwhile, we knew nothing of them, other than Commander Zorp's experiences, and that symbol, of course. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep. In retrospect, we should have seen this coming long before the Protector went missing. The standard Seize and Investigate was one of the Federation's most controversial standard missions. Proponents against it noted it was highly aggressive and violates the rights of the species of whom it was being done to. Advocates for it never really had a good counter to that, but mentioned it was necessary for the safety of the Federation. Besides, the Federation was the most advanced alliance in the known galaxy. Even if other alien species were unhappy with the policy, they could never stand up to the Federation in a meaningful way. It was foolish and short-sighted. It was only a matter of time before we ran into a species more powerful than us. And a standard Seize and Investigate was not exactly the kind of first impression you wanted to make. In fact, I had even made that exact objection at the Academy all those years ago, back when I was vehemently against the standard Seize and Investigate. Of course, over time I had wised up, and realized it was a necessary evil for the good of the Federation. But now I realized, too late, my younger self was the wise one. This policy was our undoing. It was just a matter of time. But after 3 rotations, they didn't come, and there was no invasion. I had just started to relax, and things were starting to return to normal, save for a small fleet protecting each planet and a few warships stationed at my outpost. The date was rotation 158, year 1011, Central Federation calendar. I was just about to end my shift when I got called up to the Situation Room. "Sir," the ensign said, motioning me over to her station, "we have detected a small fleet of 12 vessels of unknown configuration headed right for us." My heart started to sink. "The ships are still a few light years out, but are coming in fast. We estimate no more than a few hours before arrival. The automated outposts were unable to identify the ships, but we did get a single match on a symbol, but the symbol is classified." Without a word, I walked over to the console and input my command code. The image came up, and I froze. That feeling had come over me again. The primal fear of being watched by a predator who had you in their sights. But this time it wasn't a story. This time it wasn't something that was happening to someone else. This time it was real, and it was happening now. "Sir, what should we do?" the ensign asked. "Send a priority message to command. Tell them it has begun." The communications officer quickly started sending a string of messages to command, but it didn't take long before one of them stopped and turned back to me. "Sir, we're being jammed." "Sir, what do we do?" my next in command asked me. I hadn't taken my eyes off that symbol. The one recognized symbol. The symbol the Protector crew had found on that alien ship's hull. The one connection we had to the bipedal aliens. But this wasn't one ship. It was 12. And all of them had the symbol on it. I still didn't know what the symbol meant, But at this point, it didn't really matter. Even so, it was all I could do to stare at that screen, to stare at that symbol. The Federation's day of reckoning had come. We didn't know much about our enemy, but we knew the symbol by which they identified their ships. Terran Alliance. "Sir, what do we do?" my next in command asked me again in a more urgent tone. I was frozen in fear. For the first time in my career as a general, I did not know. The Bipeds. Written by Iowa Kid 97. Read by Daniel Million.